infinite things, and the power of creation is also infinite, not limited, to the point that he creates yesh me'ayin. Then there's a giver. Giver means in Gehura, that Hashem also has the power to withhold. Withhold means to conceal, to hide his light, that we shouldn't see his light, and it should be covered. In the mind. Okay, so after explaining that, then the Alter says, just like Hashem's attribute of Gadol, of Chesed, the ability to create infinite, to create yesh me'ayin, is beyond human comprehension, so too, the iyar of Gibor, Hashem's power to hold back, to withhold, to hide and conceal his light, is also something which is inconceivable to humans. It's beyond human and our comprehension. Then he explains why. The reason why yesh me'ayin is beyond human comprehension is because, number one, it does not exist in the human experience. So in order for us to understand something and understand it properly, we compare it to something. So therefore, if I hear that someone did something which is really spectacular, it's amazing, I don't understand how they did it, but I can do something which is a fraction of that, so I get an idea of something they've done. But it's something that I have no concept whatsoever how it could be done. I have nothing to compare it to. I have nothing in my experience that I can even draw any parallel to, then there's no way that I can understand it. That's number one. And number two, being that the ability to create yesh me'ayin comes from Hashem's being infinite, not limited, so therefore we who are finite cannot comprehend infinity. That part is understood. Now, from there we go to the next part. Just like we can't understand Hashem's creating yesh me'ayin, and we also can't understand Hashem's power of gevura, of withholding his light. So we left off with a question yesterday. The question was, the fact that we can't understand Hashem creating yesh me'ayin, that is something which we can relate to and understand it, because yesh me'ayin is not in the human experience. But gevura is in the human experience. We also experience gevura, which means to conceal and to withhold Hashem's light. And therefore we find many mishalim chassidus, many different analogies and parallels that are drawn to other things, which are similar to the idea of tzimtzum and gevura. One of the most famous one, which we have very often, is with a Rav and a Talmud, and that if a Rav has a very deep concept, deep meaning not just deep, but also abstract, and he understands it on a totally different level and a different wavelength, and he needs to explain that to the student, what he will do is, he will communicate this concept through mashal. And when you give it through the mashal, it's all watered down. It sounds very simple. It's about a donkey and a monkey and coming and going and climbing through a window with all sort of simple little things. But in this mashal, they're very, very deep concepts. And the Shlomo Melech had spoken 3,000 mishalim. Rabbi Meir gave over 300 mishalim. This came up so many times in class, that one of the ways that the deep concept could be concealed and yet communicated at the same time is when it's communicated through a mashal. So we do have the concept of tzimtzum. I can hide things from other people. So why are we saying that tzimtzum and gevura also can be understood? So first we'll give the answer, and then we'll see it inside. So the answer is that the kind of tzimtzum that we know and the kind of tzimtzum we're talking about Hashem is not the same. And that is, in the human experience, when we do something like holding back, holding back means really holding back. What do I mean by that? Let's say, for example, that I want to say something, And I don't want certain individual to hear, so I speak very low. I whisper. And by doing that, I'm concealing it, I'm hiding it from that person. You know what hiding it means? It means that my words never reach that person's ears because it's being said very low. In other words, tzimtzum in this context means holding back. I'm not allowing the words that come out of my mouth to reach that person's ears. And being that it didn't reach his ears, he didn't hear me. If I have a certain secret and I don't want other people to know about it, what does it mean, tzimtzum? Tzimtzum means I'm withholding the information. That information never reaches the other person. So now let's think of the teacher and the student. If I have a deep concept and I hide it in a mushal, it's the same thing. I never gave you that deep concept. The deep concept never reached your conscious brain. It's hidden in the mushal, that's true, but in your conscious brain, you're not thinking of the deep concept because you wouldn't be able to comprehend it. So it actually does not exist in your brain, in your conscious brain. You follow this part, or it's not clear? What I'm saying is just like when I whisper and I'm withholding information from somebody whispering, what does it mean to withhold? Withhold means I'm not allowing my words to reach your ears, which means it never reached the recipient, correct? Mm-hmm. If I want to be hidden somewhere, you shouldn't know where I am, and I'm hiding behind a door, I'm hiding behind a curtain, and you can't see me. That means that my image does not reach your eyes because I blocked it. If I want it to be dark in a room and therefore I close the shutters so the sunlight shouldn't come in, so withholding it means that the sunlight actually does not enter the house. What am I driving at? That in general, the way we understand holding back means, when I hold back means that what I have to offer actually does not arrive in the kalim of the recipient. So let's take the example of the mushroom. Have a very deep concept, and I want, you know what, let's use an example. If you learn a Mishnah, these Mishnahs were written by Tanya. So you can imagine that what's in the Mishnah is infinite wisdom is in each single Mishnah, correct? Everyone agrees. Now you take a child who's 8 years old and you say, I'll pay you money if you learn Mishnah by heart. And he learns the Mishnah by heart. Now he knows the Mishnah and he's saying every word. Does he know what's in the Mishnah or not? No, he knows the words. And even if he knows the translation of each word, but he doesn't know everything that it says in Gemara on the Mishnah. He has no idea of all the commentary on the Gemara. He has no idea of all the commentaries on the commentaries. He has no idea of all the Chassidus and Kabbalahs in this Mishnah. So there's a wealth, there's infinite information that he doesn't know. It's being withheld from him. What does withheld mean? That all this deep information is actually not found in his conscious brain. It's hidden in the words. And being that he has the words in his head, somewhere in his head, he has everything there. But in his conscious brain, he actually does not have all this wealth of information. No different than if I speak quietly, if I close the shutters, or I hide behind the door, that you don't see me, which means that I am not the me or my voice or my wisdom, whatever it is actually not reaching the recipient to a certain degree. I don't know if it's so simple or it's so confusing or what's happening. Can't tell. I'm looking to see a reaction.
So go back to the thing about the marshal,
right?
So you're saying that a concept is constrained to the forms, to the the limits of being a marshal. If that makes sense.
Tzimtzum?
Is it just you're talking about when you have a marshal and you're trying to explain symptom, or when you have a marshal to try and explain any concept?
Not any concept. A marshal, by definition, is a form of tzimtzum.
So you're saying you take that concept. For example, the way that people explain Chochmah Bina and Zach, they say it's imagine it's like a shooting thing first. It's spark, and then I don't know, I just sort of like
lightning,
yeah, like exactly, like okay, probably wouldn't be true, but like yeah, like lightning, and then it's like each stage is like it's not actually that, but that's the way that you explain it. So you're saying that you take a concept and then you like almost like weave it into the fabric of like this. Yeah, exactly.
Right, you're simplifying. When you simplify it, the deep concept, which is the real concept, is actually not in my conscious brain. I don't get that part. Let me say the other part, maybe that'll make it easier. What's with Hashem? When we say that Hashem's light and energy is in a tree which he creates, but we don't see it, we don't feel it, it's as if it doesn't exist. We don't even know that it's there. Some people don't even believe that it's there. But at the same time, Hashem's life and energy is in every fiber of its being. Every aspect, every detail, every fraction of the tree has in it Hashem's chayis, otherwise it couldn't exist. There's nothing in the tree and no place in the tree that you could say Hashem's chayis is not there. It's there. But at the same time, it's as if it doesn't exist. That kind of tzimtzum, we do not know how that could possibly happen. It's like saying, I'm going to speak to you, you'll hear it, I'm speaking right into your ears, but I don't want you to hear what I'm saying. Could you do that? My voice will reach your ears, but I don't want you to hear me. You can't do that. You cannot speak, or you speak low, or you speak in a different direction, or you speak in a different language. You're doing something that what I'm trying to hide from you doesn't get to you. But if it gets to you and you receive it and you absorb it in every single part of you, and we have to say that because otherwise it couldn't exist, and yet at the same time, it's totally concealed as if it's not there at all. That is something which defies logic and defies the nature the way we know it. And that's why we say that this tzimtzum that Hashem does is also infinite, just like the power to create yesh me'ayin. Yeah.
You're saying like that it's hidden in plain sight, kind of? Like it's right in front of us, we see everything, but it's hidden. That's what you're saying.
Now, if it be in front of us in plain sight, but it's hidden, means it's not reaching my eyes.
No, we see the tree, we see everything, but we don't see the.
Oh, the Dvaravaya is hidden, yes.
The life force in there.
Yeah, the life force in there.
But we see everything, it's not hidden.
Right, it's totally not apparent in the tree, even though it's there. It's not apparent in me, in my body, in my being. Hashem's life force is in every part of me, every part of creation. And yet when we look at things, we see it as a separate entity, independent, has nothing to do with Hashem. Like I said, some people even need proof to believe that it's actually there. How is it possible that it should be in creation and everything in creation, and yet it's totally hidden, concealed, as if it doesn't exist? And if we were to say, well, obviously it's there, but to some degree it's not there, that's what you can't say that about Hashem. If it wouldn't be there to some degree, that some degree wouldn't exist. So it has to be in it, every particle of it, every detail of it, every layer of it has to have Hashem's life in it. So there is no layer where it's not there. And at the same time, it's totally concealed. That's Gevurah, that only Hashem, that defies logic and that defies nature, the way we know it.
How does that define logic?
Because how could something be there
that isn't there,
and I'm not aware of it, right?
Oh, yeah, you're right.
It's there and not there at the same time. That's what we're saying. In other words, normally, you understand when we say that Hashem is hidden from our world, it means that to a certain extent, he's not here. There's something, and it would say, lacking in his presence. What we're saying now, there's nothing lacking in his presence. He is here completely, in every sense of the word. There's nothing that's lacking, and at the same time, he's totally concealed as if he has nothing to do with his creation whatsoever. Total concealment.
So what are we seeing then?
The tree,
Like
the cow. We're seeing a separate entity, something that has its own identity.
Right. But I guess like, what is that? Like, where is that coming from? You know, like if Hashem's everything and Hashem is concealing himself at the same time, then like what is left? We're seeing, you know what I mean?
That's the power of concealment, that he creates a world and he makes that we should perceive the world as a separate entity. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing something that it appears as if it has a life of its own. I mean, I don't have to prove to anyone what we actually see. We see what we see.
It's all illusion.
Rabbi Marash one time had a condition. His condition was that he did not see the world as a separate entity. He saw everything as it's all part of Hashem. It's not supposed to be that way. Some Tzaddik came to him, I think every day it says, he said another maimer, another maimer, another maimer. I think after 100 maimarim, he was able to recover from whatever it was. We don't have that problem. We have the opposite problem.
Well, I thought all tzaddikim see it like that all the time.
What?
I thought all tzaddikim always see everything in its source.
No, in other words, we also, when a person learns Chassidus and really gets it and really registers it, you would say we see it with the eyes of our mind. It's the eyes of flesh and it's the eyes of the mind. But there's different levels of understanding. So naturally, by tzaddikim, the more they understand, the more they have that depth in a certain sense. It's like seeing it. But remember I said yesterday that Mazrich and Maggid said that tzaddikim, 3 days before their passing, they see the Dvar Havaya, they don't see the Gashmis. So obviously, even by tzaddikim, there are levels of how open and how clear they see. So not all tzaddikim, they see it clearly, they know it clearly, but to say that, like it'll be when Mashiach comes, that you'll look with your physical eyes at something physical, and it'll be a sort of a visual experience of seeing Hashem in some way. I don't know what that way is, but that is something which will only be when Mashiach comes. And yes, and tzaddikim experience something similar to that now.
I guess what I don't get, and maybe the point is that if you don't get it, is that like after all this symptom, this like the Hashem's like or, and then at the end, somehow that ends up with being a physical object. Like how do we get from like A to B? You know, like I get the muscle like he's concealing his light, and it's like you think of it as light, but then like light isn't like physical. So how do we get from
that's the definition of yesh mi'ayin, yeah. Right. And that yesh mi'yesh would have been when Hashem creates Atzilus, and this light becomes a lower light, 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 but all within the spiritual realm. It should be this transformation from spiritual to physical. That is yesh mi'ayin. That's exactly what we're talking about. You can't understand how that happens. In other words, I can also think about things and sort of think about it in my mind that it's like so real that it almost feels as if it's real. You know, they tell the story. I'll leave out some details for some reason, but they tell the story about this person that he would always exaggerate, make up stories, and this tribe, so to speak, that they're just everything is they lie about things and things are not really honest and truthful. So one time there was this man, and he had this huge family, few wives, one of these countries, a few wives, and who knows, a few dozen children. There's a lot of noise in the house. So he got all, he just couldn't take the noise. So he said to them, you should know that in the next town, there's this huge sale now. They're selling things for the cheapest prices. You never get this in a million years. I think you should go there and do some shopping now. They all got excited. The whole place emptied out. They all ran, they went there. Chaye got very quiet. But half an hour later, he says to himself, I mean, there's a huge, there's a huge sale there. Things are priced that they never won again. What am I sitting here for? Let me go also. And he ran off. What's the story that some people, they lie. They become so real to them that they forget that the whole thing that they made up was a lie. You know, they forget that it's a lie. You can think about something, picture it in your mind so vividly as if it's really happening. You know, you can smell the grass, but after you stop thinking, you won't find grass in front of you. From the thought, it'll never pop out to be grass. Otherwise, it would be a problem getting a house. You think about a house, You picture it real good, all the rooms that you want, and upstairs, the downstairs, the basement, the roof, the backyard. You can have an amazing front yard, an amazing backyard. You picture everything, and you really picture it strong. You picture it for 10 days in a row, and you could actually sleep in the bed, sit by the table and eat, but no house is going to pop out of your head. Of course, from thought comes physical material like wood, metal, or anything else like it. So the Havdil, when Hashem created the world, it's Ruchnius be getting lower and lower and lower. But from Ruchnius to become Gashmius, that is true, Yesh Me'ayin. That's exactly what it's about. When you say, I don't get it, that's exactly what he's saying. You won't get it.
Nice.
Now you got it. Okay, let's see if we can, if what I just said to you is also inside Tanya, if it's there. Let's read the words. Rabbi Elkanah said that he had a teacher in Israel. He was considered one of the greatest minds of the Hasidus. His name was Moshe Garari. Sometimes he would learn a minor, then ask a question. Nobody knew the answer, and he gave an explanation. After he gave an explanation, he said, I have one question. If this is what it really means, why doesn't it say so in the minor? What was his answer? His answer was that if you look at the mimer again, you'll see it actually says so. That's what it says. So let's see what it says inside. We are on page we're in chapter 4. Sorry, in the wrong place. I think 46. Yeah, page 46. Page 46, the bottom. 7. Okay, I think it's the top of page 46. So let's start with the bottom of 45 because that leads into it. Just like it is impossible for the mind of any creature. I don't know English properly. I don't know why they keep using the word creature. I always thought creature are things that crawl on the floor. Creatures, animals. I would use the word creation. It's just as impossible in the mind for any creature to apprehend his attribute of Gedula, which is the ability to create something out of nothing and give it. Now I'll go to page 46. And to give it life. Kach mamish, in the same way exactly, ein bi'cholte, it is impossible, it's not possible for us, lahasig midas gvuraseh, to understand Hashem's attribute of gvura, which is midas hatzimtzum, the attribute of tzimtzum, umaniyas hispashtus achayis migdoloseh, and restraining and holding back the chayis that comes from his attribute of gedula. Preventing it, Gevura prevents the chayas from manifesting itself in this created being, but it's there in a hidden way, which means the life force of Hashem, which on one hand is creating it, yesh me'ayin, is its entire source. That's the only reason why it exists. At the same time, it's as if it exists totally independent. And it appears as if it's not an extension of that chayis. It appears as if it's something that's independent, just like the light that comes from the sun, which it's clear that it depends on the sun. And as soon as the sun goes down, the light disappears. But over here, it appears to us, the way we perceive it, as if it's totally separate, totally independent, But in truth, it's not independent. It's really nothing more than ispashtus or irmashemish. It's no different than the light that comes from the sun. And the light that comes from the sun is totally dependent on the sun and can't exist a moment without the sun. The moment the sun goes down, that moment the light disappears. Nevertheless, how is it possible? Hein Gvura. So this is the definition of Gvura, Hashem's power of Gvura. Asher Kol Yochel, that Hashem, who is capable of doing everything and anything because he's infinite, that he could be mitzamtzem hachayis, to conceal the life force, v'haruchnius, hanishpa meruch piv hastirei, shleyabotel guf hanivra mitzias. That the thing that's created doesn't lose itself in the presence of Hashem. In other words, really what should have happened is that we should be able to see with our eyes that this object, this person, this animal, whatever it is totally connected to Hashem, has no life of its own, has no identity of its own. Like I gave the example yesterday. Again, it's not a perfect example, of course, it's just some idea. It's like looking at a human being. You're looking at flesh and blood, and yet at the same time, you see that there's something here more than just flesh and blood. It's not just flesh and blood and muscle and tissue and whatever. It's a human being. There's a neshama here. Now, no one's going to say that they actually see a soul. You can't see a soul. But yet I do see an identity manifesting through the body. And that's the way it should be, that when you look at a tree, you look at an animal, you look at a person, you look at the walls, you look at a building, we should be able to see Hashem's presence manifesting through this object. The fact that it's totally concealed, as if it doesn't exist, that is Hashem's Gevurah. So again, if Hashem wouldn't put the Gevurah part to it, there would be a creation, Yesh Mi'ayin, but we would see it totally connected to Hashem, totally that we would see openly how it's a manifestation of Hashem. So the fact that it's there and gives life to it, not just gives life, it creates a yesh mi'ayin, and the object can't exist for 1 second without the source. And at the same time, it's totally hidden as if it doesn't exist. Ze ein b'seichel shum nivra, page 48. This is beyond the scope of any human mind or any created mind, even angels, lahasik, to understand muhus at simtza v'hesta, that this kind of concealment, that it should be totally concealed, which would mean it's not there, but at the same time, it's there and creates a yesh mi'ayin that we can't understand. Just like we can't understand how Hashem creates yesh mi'ayin, we also can understand how Hashem conceals his light that creates yesh mi'ayin. So basically, we're going back to what he said before, that really the whole world has no identity of its own. The whole world is all one with Hashem, absolutely one. And the fact that we see it the way we see it is because Hashem applied his attribute of Gevura, and the attribute of Gevura, that's what makes it appear as if it has a separate entity.
Rabbi Majeski, so when is Yesh Ma'ayin fitting into the picture? Is it, this is the whole process describing how Yesh Ma'ayin happens, or this is like Yesh Ma'ayin happened and it was Hashem's chesed, that everything was just in existence and that it was already something like physical there, and then within the physical objects, Gevurah happens to make symptom of Hashem's light within? It's not in chronologically right up in time, first this and then that. Obviously, Hashem created the world with both of these attributes. First the chesed. When I say first, I don't mean first chronologically. I mean, the first thing is to create, to produce something. The second aspect of it is to produce it in a way that it's totally hidden. Yeah?
But don't have like something like fundamental, like for like everything like was created, like because if like Hashem didn't have like the hesed, how the world could be like created, you know? Like Gevura was like, how to say, for Hashem had the limits from the, for the world, like, had the creation, but like, if Hashem couldn't like have the Hesed, the world couldn't be created, right?
Right.
So like was the, like was, I don't know, like, was everything like to be created,
Everything is what?
Like to be created, like was the creation, right? No, like it was the beginning, right? Like if Hashem couldn't like have the Hesed, how the world couldn't be created?
So that's why we say he created the world with his chesed. He did create the world with his chesed, and he created the world with his gevura. The chesed is the part that makes it exist.
That was like the fundamental, like because like he couldn't like create it, right?
So I'm saying Hashem created the world with his chesed, and so the chesed is responsible for the world's existence, and the gevura is responsible for the fact that we don't see Hashem's existence in an open way. That's what it means. With this part, the Alter Rebbe also answers the question from the first chapter. The first chapter opened up with a question. It says in the Chumash, you should know today that Hashem hu Elokim, and Hashem is Elokim. Eined Mavadi, nothing exists beside him. I mean, there's no one else besides him. And the Alter Rebbe asked, and what would I think otherwise, that there's another God somewhere? And he's hiding somewhere, and he's soaking in the water under the ground. Not only that, the Chumash says, you should know it, and you should take it to heart. It appears like it's something very difficult to understand, and you have to know it and take it to heart. And what does that mean? The Torah wouldn't go through all that just to bring across the idea that Hashem exists, which, by the way, there's a machlokes amongst the Rishonim, amongst the authorities of halacha. Is there a mitzvah to believe that Hashem exists?
Yeah.
Some say yeah, and some say no. What does it mean? Some say no. How can everything is a mitzvah and this is not a mitzvah? Those that say yeah, say this is the mitzvah. I am God, your God that took you out of Mitzrayim. Those that say that it's not a mitzvah say like this. What does the mitzvah mean? A command, right? You have to first accept that there's a commander before you can accept his command. So how can it be a command to believe that I'm your commander?
This is the craziest question.
So therefore, let's say the Ramban says, no, the belief that Hashem was there, Yidden saw Hashem in Mitzrayim. They saw Hashem take them out of Mitzrayim. All this there was not even a question. So what's the Neicha Hashem Alakech? What's the first commandment? That you should believe that Hashem is infinite, that He's perfect, that He's complete, that He always existed, He'll exist forever. In other words, to believe in the greatness of Hashem and the perfection of Hashem. But just to believe that there's a creator to the universe, you don't need a commandment for that. That's obvious. All the people that claim that they're atheists, there couldn't be anything more foolish than that, because it's totally illogical to say that a world with so much brilliance, with so much wisdom and so much sequence, such an order, every single detail is put together in such a brilliant way that even scientists with all the knowledge of science still can't figure it out. In so many areas, they still admit that they've only sort of scratched the surface with all the technology, with all the computers, and with everything they've got, only scratched the surface to believe that all this came about just happened to be by chance. At least have a doubt. Maybe Hashem exists. I once asked somebody, you doubt it? No, He doesn't. Unless you prove to me that God exists. So I say, not even a doubt that maybe all this came about through somebody like, is that logical? It's not logical. So why there's so many brilliant people that don't believe? Not because it doesn't make sense, because it's not convenient. Once I believe that Hashem created the world, I'm in trouble. Someone told me he was listening to a talk show, the host was not Jewish, and the person who was interviewing was also not Jewish, but they were talking about what's going on in the world now. And the host says, what do you think? Why is there so much? Why do people hate Jews so much? I mean, I know people could be racist, but I don't see that their hate to other races are the same hate like to Jews. It's like enormous. What is it about? So the guy says, why don't you get it? They brought all the laws of morality into the world with the 10 Commandments and all that, and people just, they don't want it. In other words, they made the world feel guilty about not killing and not stealing and not doing all the other wonderful things that they'd love to do. And that's the problem. So basically, I'm not going into that's the reason, but I'm saying on a personal level, once the person accepts that Hashem exists, that's all. All you need to know is accept there's a creator, then you must go to the next step that this creator is brilliant, and this creator created the world for a purpose, which means that I have a purpose, which means that I have to be accomplishing something in this world. And all of a sudden, I'm not just free to do what I want, how I want, what I want. I have to fulfill a certain purpose. And that conscious is something which people don't feel comfortable with. And therefore, it's a defense mechanism simply not to accept that Hashem exists. They don't realize it, but that's where it's coming from. Because logic doesn't make any sense. Nobody would believe it about anything else in the world. If you ask somebody, how do you think this airplane came about? And you say, oh, you wouldn't believe it. There was a junkyard somewhere. There were thousands of pieces of metal, and a very strong wind was blowing, and all the pieces of metal just got together, and they formed into an airplane, and the motor formed into a motor, and they got an airplane like that. Amazing. You would think that this person, you would be sure the person's off the wall, if they believe that. Somehow with the world, which is a gazillion times, infinite times more brilliant than this analogy that I just gave, a person will say, I don't believe it happened through anybody, through any intelligence. I believe it happened by itself unless you prove otherwise. That does not make any sense. Why would we bring all this in? Oh, so we said that, but Yadayit Ayem is not about that Hashem exists. Now we understand deeper. It's about understanding that nothing else exists other than Hashem. That's something which we need a lot of thought and we need a lot of understanding until it registers in our mind that Hashem and the world are one. So the definition of the word Ein Od Milvado is not there's no other God. It means there's no other true existing entity outside of Hashem. Everything is an extension of Him. Okay, to be continued.
So just it's like, I think what the piece I was missing was like it creates klipa, like that's like the shell, like this concept of when Hashem's like removing his light, how do we get to make physical?
There you are, the same thing. Here's something klipa which opposes Hashem, the opposite of Hashem, denies Hashem, and yet Hashem is in it and creates it, and without that it couldn't exist.
Right. And even just not even something like the like klipa it's just like klipa like kind of it's a shell, it's covering Hashem's light. Like
right, yeah, even
pulling yourself back
right.
from the shell around it.
That's the definition. That's the definition of Gevurah. Remind me tomorrow. I want to explain this phrase. He says in Hebrew, "Hein hein Gevurah." This, in fact, is Gevurah. It's connected to something in Gemara related to what you just now said. So you have the responsibility to remind me tomorrow.
אנשים לא רוצים להאמין בהשם כי הם מרגישים אשמים שהם לא עושים את מה שאומר?
מיתת הכרה.
בתת מודע?
מה?
מה אמרת?
מיתת הכרה.
מה זה אומר?
זאת אומרת לא שהם חושבים, אני לא רוצה להאמין כי אז אני חייב לעשות משהו. זה משהו unconscious, מיתת הכרה, לא משהו בפנים מונע מהם להאמין כי יודעים שאם אני מקבל שיש בורא עולם, אז יש לי כבר התחייבות.
אז כאילו מפחדים מההתחייבות שלה, אז לעבוד בו.
יש לי אחריות, יש לי התחייבות, אז אני לא יכול.
למה אנחנו כל כך מפחדים מהתחייבות? למה
אני רוצה להיות חופשי, לעשות מה שאני רוצה.
אבל בעצם שאתה מחויבות פה, למה אתה באמת הרבה יותר חופשי.
אני צריך להבין את זה, זה כבר צריך.
זה גם אני צריכה להבין את זה, לא רק.
כן, זה כבר עבודה להבין. ככה אני כמו תינוק, מרגיש, אני רוצה לעשות מה שאני רוצה.
אוקיי.
מסכן את עצמך, אתה הולך ברחוב ואתה משחק עם סכין, מה אתה עושה? הוא לא מבין את זה, הוא רוצה לעשות מה שהוא רוצה. אז ככה מבוגרים.
אוקיי, יש לי עוד שאלה, אנחנו מותר לעשות מדיטציה?
מדיטציה?
כן, זה כאילו
כן.
סוג של נשימות והעבודה המחשבות.
מותר לעשות את זה עם מי שיודע לעשות את זה באופן נכון.
אני עושה את זה מהיוטיוב. אני עושה את זה כאילו מהאינטרנט, מהיוטיוב.
צריך לדעת, יש כזה שזה קשור לעבודה.
באמת?
יש כזה שזה 100% קשור.
אם הוא יהודי.
לא משנה. צריך להיות יהודי נתיב שמכיר את התורה וההלכה.
אז לכן, עידה.
אני מנסה לדבר. אנחנו טוב. לא, teaching.
Amazing. And now you get to have Rabbi Majeski twice? Are you at the first or Rabbi Majeski?
No, I'm just gonna put my notes.